Alright YouTube, so in today's video we are asking the question, where the hell is Manhunt 3? Now if you've never played the Manhunt games, they are a stealth-based survival horror game. But the obvious biggest draw of this series is the absolutely brutal fucking kills that you can do. I don't know if there's another game out there that quite like this. I'm sure there's something that I'm not thinking of. Maybe like the Condemned series. I never played that, but I know it's supposed to be pretty brutal. But that's the main draw of this series, is you have access to a lot of different weapons, from a plastic bag to a crowbar to actual guns to shards of glass to like bricks, fucking like wire to saw people's heads off and choke them out with. With pretty much every item in the game, there's usually about 3 different kills you can do, because there's like a brutality system. There's just your basic kill, there's a second level of brutality, and then a third one, which is usually pretty graphic. I mean, these games were so controversial in their day that the first and the second one were banned in multiple different countries. The second one, even before it ever got released, was given like an adult rating, which doesn't happen a whole lot for games that aren't meant to be an adult game, like sex games or whatever. Like, this game got an adult rating because of how gory and graphic it is. Like, that's crazy to even think about. But the biggest issue with this is that when it comes to adult rated games, Microsoft and like Sony don't allow that on their console really. And stores can't sell that shit. Like, you can't go to Walmart and pick up an adult-rated game. So this was a big problem for Rockstar. They actually had to go back and edit Manhunt 2. They did like a bunch of different things. The main thing they did was they added a blur effect to a lot of the kill scenes. They took out every decapitation in the game except for the plot ones. Like, there's 2 important decapitations in the story. They took that out. There's a couple of stages and levels where they had innocent people, and they took out the ability to even kill them at all, because you'd get a different kind of reward at the end if you had killed them. And lastly, they took out the rating system. The first Manhunt had a rating system at the end of each stage. You get a rating from 1 to 5 stars, depending on how brutal some of the kills were, how fast you completed it, and then you got like a star for just completing the stage at all. So they took that out of the game completely, I guess, so you'd have less incentive to be as brutal as you possibly can. But again, we are here to ask the question, where is the third installment? Where is Manhunt 3? The games are quite popular, more like a cult classic kind of thing. They haven't sold a whole lot. They've only sold, between the 2 titles in the series, they've sold like 1 million and something, which isn't a crazy amount of sales, but still good enough to warrant a third installment. And if you look up ratings for the games, they vary depending on where you go. Some people give it like a 1 star because they're offended by the game, but generally speaking, you'll get like a 70% rating or higher, like a 3 or a 4 star. They're never going to be a 5-star game. They're not really meant to be. So just for comparison's sake, and the games are in no way related, Final Fantasy VII, one of the most popular games ever made, my personal favorite game, as of 2015, had only sold 11 million copies. Between these 2 games, they sold 1.7 million. So we'll be generous and say almost 2 million copies for what is a relatively unknown series. The first one obviously was a brand new IP, so that's going to be kind of hard to sell depending on the kind of marketing they do for it. And then with all the controversy surrounding this series, they still almost managed to sell 2 million copies between the 2 games. And actually, just now looking into it, that was as of 2008. That was like a year after the second one came out. By now, there's no telling how many they've sold. What I'm trying to get at here is there is a community for this type of shit. Yes, this game takes it to another level, but gore in video games is nothing new. I mean, a game as great as Witcher 3 actually added in an entire DLC for some brutal fucking finishers. They're not exactly comparable, but I mean, in Witcher 3, I can cut a guy from his shoulder to his waist fucking in half. I can cut off his head. I think there's some finisher scenes where you cut off their fucking limbs and shit. You can also look to a very popular series like Mortal Kombat. That series is literally built on its gore. That's what garnered its popularity in the early days. It was like the first game to really ever step that far, at least at the time. And if you look at its most recent iteration, Mortal Kombat X, that game has taken the gore to a whole nother level.
Melina wins. Fatality.
So to me, the graphic content or the gore can't really be the issue, because we have plenty of that in modern gaming. And as for the controversy surrounding this series, that's nothing new for Rockstar. They've caught controversy for pretty much every iteration of Grand Theft Auto, at least since they stepped into the 3D realm. I don't know if any of the old school top-down ones ever had controversy. Wouldn't be surprised if they did, though. But ever since Grand Theft Auto 3 and up, they've caught controversy with pretty much every iteration of Grand Theft Auto. I know one of them was supposedly a part of a murder, like somebody killed somebody and they had a copy of Grand Theft Auto in their room, so Grand Theft Auto was to blame. Same thing happened with the first Manhunt. Some kid got killed by his friend, I think, and the friend had like Manhunt in his room, so Manhunt's to blame. So controversy for their games is nothing new. They deal with this all the time. I mean, the first Manhunt, again, was supposedly a part of a murder. Tons of shit surrounding the first installment, and yet they still managed to make a sequel to it, knowing the kind of reaction they would get. So I don't think they're really worried about the backlash they would get from a third installment. They deal with it all the time. It's almost these days like they do it intentionally. I mean, they added a torture scene to Grand Theft Auto 5. There's no way they didn't think that was going to be perceived as bad. So I don't think the backlash or the controversy they would get from a third installment is really the issue. So what is the reason we don't have a third one yet? Like, I'm legitimately asking why, because I don't have the answer. My only thought really is maybe a money situation. Maybe between the two games in the series, they weren't making enough money. Because again, between both games, they've sold less than 2 million copies. I can't find online how much it costs to make these games. Like, how much it actually cost Rockstar to make Manhunt 1 and Manhunt 2 versus the sales. Because if, we'll say they each sold half. So like half of the 1.7 million was Manhunt 1, the other half was Manhunt 2. And a brand new game, of course, costs $60. So 1.7 million times 60 equates to about $102 million. Now that number is going to vary because, for one, these sales figures are from 2008. And of course, the game wasn't always $60. The price would have dropped over time. So we don't know exactly how much the series has made, but around $100 million, I'd say they made some fucking money. And even back then, in 2007, when they released Manhunt 2, Rockstar was huge. They've always been a pretty big company, but these days, they are one of the biggest and best publishers and developers out there. I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5 made $1 billion, and nowadays, I don't even know how much they made. When you factor in microtransactions, and them releasing Grand Theft Auto 5 on multiple different generations of consoles, there's no telling how much that single game has made. So, I'd say that GTA 5 by itself has paid for Manhunt 3. Where the fuck is our game? Like, it honestly doesn't make sense that after a decade now, we still don't have a Manhunt 3. If we go through everything we've discussed in the video so far, the game itself has like a cult status because of what it is. There is an audience for this type of game. The game itself, it's sold decently well. If we're splitting up the 1.7 again, 800, the games have sold almost roughly 1 million copies per game. That's pretty fucking good. The gratuitous gore in the game, not a big deal. We have plenty of gore in modern gaming. Going back to the sales again, the game had to have made fucking money. It just had to have. The game is pretty linear. Like, you play stages. It's not like an open world game or anything. So it couldn't have been that complicated or expensive to make. Outside of the people who are upset or triggered by this series, the game was rated pretty alright. 70% or higher, 3 or 4 star to most people. So that's pretty good. The series is well received. And then, of course, controversy is nothing new for Rockstar. They get this with most of their games these days. Most of their games are pretty violent to some degree. They get some kind of controversy every time they release a game, especially Grand Theft Auto or the Manhunt series. So I legitimately do not have an answer as to why there isn't a Manhunt 3. It just doesn't make any sense at this point, after it's been so long since we've had another iteration in the series. Because of the cult status of the game these days and the gratuitous gore that it has. Like, if they were to announce a Manhunt 3, it would literally just make them money. There's no fucking way it wouldn't. Oh, and also, where the fuck is Bully 2 already? God damn. So, of course, guys, let me know your thoughts below on this. Maybe some of you have a little more insight than I do. Maybe some of you had some inside information as to why the fuck we don't have a Manhunt 3 yet. Let me know what your favorite was below if you played the first or the second one. I think the second one has some pretty intense gore that the first one didn't have. But for me personally, the first Manhunt is my personal favorite because that's the one I actually owned at a younger age. One of my brothers had the second one, and I played it on the Wii, which that was pretty intense, to be honest, playing the fucking Manhunt series on the Wii. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, turn on notifications, follow me on Twitter at @TheDashingDavid. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
All the things that we thought we were losing, I'm a ghost and you know this. That's why we broke up in the first place. Cause